Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome to the Core Women Podcast. Today's guest is Sabine Gedeon, who is a transformational speaker, executive advisor, and founder of Gedeon Enterprises. With more than 20 years of experience helping leaders, founders, and organizations navigate growth and change, Sabine is known for helping people rethink success through the lens of identity, relationship, and influence. As a Haitian immigrant who built her career through hard work and determination, Sabine eventually discovered that sustainable growth requires more than effort alone. It requires understanding the power of people, trust, and social capital. Today, we'll explore how identity shapes leadership, why relationships drive opportunity, and what it truly takes to grow into your next level. Welcome, Sabine.
Thank you, Summer. Excited to be here.
I am excited to have you here and have this conversation. Before we dive into your professional journey, if you could describe your life to this point in one word, what would that word be and why?
Evolution.
Ooh, tell us more.
Yes, I was going back and forth between transformation and evolution. And I realized that in order to evolve, the transformation has to happen. So it's just the next layer. When I look at who I am today and the journey that I've been on for the last 40 or so years, I'm unrecognizable from the person who I've been. And it's been the experiences that I had that on the surface or when I was going through them, they sucked, if I'm being completely honest. But every time I've been able to go through it and look back and appreciate the gifts and the wins and the blessings from them, I feel they call it what, the quantum leap, right? Or the quantum jump, right? Like I can see the moments in my life that shaped me that looked completely opposite from what I thought it would be that allowed me to be who I am today. So I just use the word evolution at this stage because I've truly evolved in who I am, the way that I think, the way that I approach life, the way that I see life, the way that I engage with others.
Oh my gosh, I love that word. And of the 400 plus episodes that I've done, I don't even think I've gotten evolution. I love that word though. So thank you for using it and thank you for describing why that word is significant and important for you. So, my next question, as a Haitian immigrant, you were raised to believe that hard work was the key to success. At what point did you realize that mindset was no longer enough to get you where you wanted to go?
Oh, 3 years into corporate.
Tell us more.
Yes, 3 years into corporate. So as you said, a Haitian immigrant, I mean, school was important. I'm the immigrant. My parents are immigrants. And so it was put your head down, get good grades, be good. So that served me when I was in school. It served me when I was in college. It served me the first few years of my corporate career. But what I quickly realized as I was trying to do all the things that I was told that I was supposed to do when I first started corporate, it was be the first one in, the last one out, leave your problems at the door, all of these unwritten rules. And I used to have this manager, she referred to them as dots. Take on all the dots. So dots are development opportunities that suck. So basically,
Oh, wow. You can't see my face, but I'm like, what?
like the projects that are important, but no one wants to take on. And so, like, I would raise my hand and do that. And I realized that I wasn't advancing at the level that I thought I should have, playing by these quote unquote rules of working harder or being the hardest worker. And I started to observe it's two colleagues, but I merged them into one archetype that I call Bob. And I started to observe Bob. And what I noticed was Bob was not the first one in and the last one out. Bob was not taking on the dots, yet he was on these major initiatives. He was having skip level meetings with senior leadership. I didn't even know what those were at the time. He was being tasked, like major projects. And I started asking questions like, I know he doesn't work as hard as I do, or they didn't work as hard as I do. Like, what am I missing? Well, what I was missing was Bob was having conversations with senior leaders. Bob was asking for opportunities. Bob was figuring out what's important, what are their strategic initiatives, and how he could plug and play. So he was figuring out what they needed and how to make himself an asset, which is why Bob was advancing in the way that he was. And also, he had mentorship, which again, we didn't have those conversations at the kitchen table. So once I realized, oh, that's how he's doing this, when in Rome, do as Romans do. So I started asking for meetings. I started having conversations. I started having the courage to ask people to mentor me, to support me, and to be my sponsor. And it completely shifted the trajectory of my career. And I've been using that what would Bob do mindset ever since.
I love that. That is amazing. So let me ask you, what really sparked that in you, that aha, I need to do what Bob does? And also, a piggyback to this question is, what gave you the courage to do that?
Yeah. Well, I was resentful at first. Let me be truthfully honest. The 24, 25-year-old me was feisty. She knew that she could outwork anyone, and she was resentful that she wasn't moving forward. And so I started having conversations with my manager around, like, the injustice of Bob's, the Bob's being able to move forward. And she started saying, well, they are doing this and they've expressed interest in this. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what it is. I never thought it was intentional. I just thought that it just wasn't fair. And so for me, once I started asking the questions, well, once I started complaining, and then getting the information and then listening, there's this saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Right. And I
Mm.
vividly remember as I started asking those questions, as I shifted it, right? Because I'm now the queen of reframing. As I shifted and I was just like, okay, well, who else? Who else can I start asking these questions to? I was in HR, so I stayed within my function and I started asking other senior HR leaders, like, how do they, when they're determining who's going to get promoted or when they're determining who's going to be on the succession plan and the talent review, like, what are those people doing? So I got curious. I got inquisitive with people that I felt safe with, and then started applying what it was that I learned.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was writing down some words. One of the words that I wrote down was curious. And there you are. You said curious, curiosity. And staying curious sometimes drives us to ask the questions, drives us to look deeper, look at maybe some of those, whatever you want to call them, maybe subconscious microaggressions on the part of our leaders
Mhm.
not offering those opportunities. And yet you still have the drive, you still have the internal flame to say, I want to know more. How are these Bobs doing it? Where was the opportunity for mentorship? Like you said, you weren't having that conversation at the kitchen table, but it certainly was a conversation that some of those leaders needed to have with their workforce
Yeah.
because that needed to be an offer. Because that is part of the sustainability within those systems is to offer good leadership, offer good mentorship, but yet you were put in a position to go find it on your own.
Yeah, I think I'm grateful too. I mean, nothing happens by accident that I was in HR, and this is where these programs, this is where all of this comes around. I think if I were some part of the business, right, I may have not even had the inclination to be like, okay, what are these programs? How do they run?
Really good point, Sabine. So you were in a position to ask these folks in the HR domain and not be fearful of that because many people in the workforce in a system looks at HR as, nope, not going there.
Mhm.
Because if I ask a question, guess what? I might be putting a red flag on my back, or I might be, making myself more obvious to A, B, or C when I don't want to do that. I just want to do my job. I don't want to be identified as the person who speaks out, the troublemaker, the one that is pushing against the system, so to speak. But you were there within that department where you're like, I can ask these questions, which is great. So, you often say that the language of business is people. What experience taught you that lesson, and how did it change your career trajectory?
Yeah, well, this experience, those earlier experiences with Bob, because what I realized in corporate America and even now in entrepreneurship, right, is that the work that we do, our skills, our expertise, the thing that we produce, whether it's services, products, or whatever, that's just one part of it. We need people to buy into the belief around our product or our services. We need people to share their experience around our products and our services. We need people to be our champions. There are 3 C's that I'm always trying to identify: who are my connectors, who are my champions, and who are my customers. And so we could sit here at our desk and create this amazing leadership development program, right? If we don't have a conversation with anyone, if we don't tell anyone about it, if we don't ask people to share it with others, it goes nowhere. And so I think that that's a piece that I learned in corporate America that is serving me more than I knew it would here in entrepreneurship. Because once I started having those conversations, then that means I was now telling people, this is what I wanted to do. And not only was I telling people, like senior leadership, this is what I wanted to do, they were giving me tasks. So as I completed those tasks, I built trust. So what that meant was when they were behind closed doors and having conversations around, talent review and who was moving up and who would be part of this program and this program, my name came up, right? But if I only had focused on putting my head down, taking on all the dots, doing all the work, they would still be having those meetings behind closed doors, but no one would be mentioning my name because no one understood what my interests are or could see the value based on the value that I brought to them.
Such wisdom here. That took some insight. That took some ingenuity. That took really looking at a system and learning about those systems and saying, one, I know I can work in a system, but how can I evolve with that system? How can I help it evolve? And then how can I be part of that leadership within the system? And then on top of that, here you are creating your own system. And so leaving corporate life and relocating to San Diego marked a major turning point for you. What identities did you have to let go of in order to step into the next version of yourself?
Oh, all of them, all of them. So, I talk about my inherited identity and the identity that I've built that stands here today. And so, again, I always bring forward that I'm an immigrant, right? Because that is an identity all in itself. I bring forward that I was born in Haiti because that in and of itself has its own identity and generational culture, all the things that have come forward for that. I bring forward the identity that, my parents taught me that in order to survive, right, because they were coming from a survival place, that's another identity, a survival identity. You had to work hard, right? Like working hard was that. And so that's the identity that I carried with me in corporate America. I worked hard. When I didn't get the opportunity, I worked harder. I made relationships. I did all the things, went back, got my master's, and then finally got the job that I had been working towards for several years. And in less than 6 months, realized that this is not what I wanted. And so for me at the time, I didn't have a plan B. Type A, there's only a plan A. There's only a plan A, and you win or you don't. And so when I realized that this thing that I had been building my entire life and identity around was no longer what I wanted, honestly, if I look back, I feel like I just outgrew the version of me. I evolved past the 23, 24-year-old version of me that wanted this role. And now here I had it and I was no longer her. So that in and of itself was an identity shift. And it forced me to go back to truth, right? When have I felt the most alive? When have I felt the most fulfilled? When have I felt the most impactful? And it had nothing to do with what I was doing there. And so it was a combination of me deciding to leave corporate and then the doorway opening for me to move to San Diego, sight unseen. I probably knew a handful of people here. So the physical transition from the East Coast to the West Coast wasn't just a like living situation transition. It was literally me shedding the identity of the version that I had been up until probably about 34 years old at that point, to coming in and building a completely new identity. So when I think about my identities that I've shared, I've shared them. But to recap, the inherited, the scarcity, the lack, the working hard, the proving, all of those identities had to go because, as you know, in entrepreneurship, it will expose. It will expose every hidden barrier, block, limiting belief, if you want to call it that, like everything that stops you from truly stepping into who you are, who you fully are. Entrepreneurship exposed all of that. And so I have been building piece by piece, season by season, the version of me that I know I came into this world to be.
Oh my gosh, you said that so well, and you just summed that up so beautifully. And it talked about that transition. It talked about what you were shedding. And that move wasn't just physical, it was emotional, it was spiritual in a sense. It was taking on somebody new, but also retaining that same drive personality, but you were reframing yourself, you were remolding yourself, and you weren't just surviving anymore. You were figuring out a way to really thrive,
Mm-hmm.
which is really beautiful. So you teach that identity comes before strategy.
Yes.
Can you explain why understanding who we are is foundational to the impact we create, the revenue we generate, and the growth we can sustain?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the lived experience to that. So, just something I want to lay for the foundation, right? So, I believe there's like these seven dimensions in which we operate, right? So, it's the mental, emotional, or you can call it intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, financial, environmental, and relational, right? And so across those seven dimensions, I think that we can see our similarities and we can see our patterns and how we show up. It's almost like when people talk about money, like your relationship to money is like your relationship to yourself and your relationship to everything else. So you can see that. And so like I'm sure you have, and I'm sure your listeners have, right? Like I've purchased courses from coaches, I've gotten mentorship from coaches, like I've in wanting to build and grow and get the freedom, like I have bought into all these things and I would do everything like beginning to end, A to Z, exactly how they told me to do it because, 50 of their clients went from 0 to 600,000 or whatever in the time frame. And I would follow the strategy and it wouldn't work for me. And as you can imagine, it would put me into this place of like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? This isn't for me. This isn't anything. This is where I realized there's three layers of me that I needed to really work on. The spiritual layer, as I just laid out the foundation, the spiritual layer was strong. The intellectual or the mental layer was strong as well. Where I had a gap was really centered around the somatic and the nervous system piece, right? Because when you think about our identity, and I'm going to go a little deeper here, our identity is not the title, right? Like when you ask people, who am I? Oh, I'm a mom, or I'm this, like all these titles, all these roles, all these characteristics. But when you strip away all of those labels, right? Who are you? Who are you genuinely? And for me, that answer came forward that, I am a spirit, I have a mind, and I have a body. And those three things, mind, body, spirit, need to be integrated and need to be working together in order for anything that I do. So I work with a lot of really, really smart people, right? They do all the things, but they're not getting what they want because sometimes we over index on intellectual, we over index on the spirituality. So when you think about making money, when you think about being able to build a business, when you think about being able to do the thing, the mission that you came here to do, or whatever the purpose is that you're working towards, if once you've stripped out the titles, the roles, the inherited identities, all those things, and you can't answer the question at the core, who am I? Everything you're building off of someone else's blueprint, someone else's imprint, someone else's paradigm. It's like a snowflake, right? Like there's no two snowflakes that are alike. We all have this blueprint that we come into this world with. And we are never taught to seek out what's in that blueprint. What does that blueprint say? Where does it guide? And we're influenced by other people and we start building their blueprints until we find ourselves in a place where we're burnt out or we've built something that we're no longer aligned with, which I had in corporate, or the thing nearly takes us out because it's not ours. And so the identity work that I do, it varies, right? How willing people are to get to the answer and that core of that question. It's going to look different for everybody. But until we do that work, everything we build, that's foundational. And everything we build on top of that is either going to be supported by the foundation or it's going to come crumbling down because the foundation was never firm.
My gosh, that is amazing. I love that. Thank you for the education. Thank you for the insight. And thank you for taking us through that evolution. So tell us about your social capital method. And I'm sure what you just explained is infused within that method.
Yeah, so the social capital method is really what I realized in those days of Bob. What would Bob do? And what I realized in terms of when I started my business in a city that I barely knew anyone. I used to use the word networking a lot, and now I realize networking is like a four-letter word that people don't like. And I get it because networking in itself is very transactional. If you think about social capital, if you've ever owned a home or owned any type of property, the day that you buy the home, the day that you buy the property is not the day that you could go withdraw the equity. And so, if we looked at social capital in terms of the relationships that we're building, like when we meet someone, right, we don't have a right to ask at that point. It's about really thinking through, like, I'm intentionally building relationships with people that I want to pour into. Stephen Covey in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, deposits before withdrawals, right? You're intentionally building relationships with people that you have full intent on depositing so that one day you can withdraw. And that's not transactional by any means. It's just like when you buy your home, you're excited by your home, you're excited to live there, but you also know there's a benefit for that. Where I've noticed in these last several years is that, when you're stuck, especially if you're a business owner and you're stuck on just networking, it's always going to be transactional. It's always going to be a volume based thing. But when you look at the people who are most successful, it's the people who have built very genuine give and take relationships that have allowed them to succeed. Not only because the people who they're interacting with are able to give and take, but now they have natural extensions where they're in rooms that we're not in, that they're mentioning our names. So the social capital method is really around identifying who are those core people for you, deciding that you are going to be intentional and consistent in building those relationships over time, and being clear about what it is that you want to build with that person.
Thank you for that. So, as we come to the close of the interview, what advice would you give someone who feels stuck in an old version of themselves and knows they're capable of more, but aren't sure how to make that shift?
Yeah, you're probably going to hate this if this is you, but start with the question, who am I? It is a simple but a hard question to answer. And it's hard because it requires you to, again, look at all the things that you've identified with. And I feel like I struggle to articulate the power of that question. But if I can share this, I am, those are the most two powerful words in our language, in our dictionary that we can use, because everything we say beyond that is what, from a spiritual perspective, the universe, God, and say, oh, okay, that's what you are? Great. Here's more of that. And so if our I am is not true to who we are or who we want to be, or if our I am is tethered to things, people, places, circumstances, then we'll always get the same things, people, circumstances that we've gotten. So if you're feeling stuck, it's going to sound bad, but like, I feel like that's the best place to be, because now you don't have a reason to numb out or you don't have a reason to be distracted. When we're stuck, that's our system saying, pause. Let's rest for a moment. Let's catch our breath. Let's peel back some layers. And so if you would be willing to just do the exercise, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a brother, all the things, and then get to the place of, okay, once those are all gone, who am I? And then when you're there, who do I now choose to be? Start deciding from there. It's almost like you break down the house and then you start building the foundation of who it is that you're going to become or you want to become.
What great guidance. Thank you, Sabine, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
You can connect with Sabine Gedeon on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, and at sabinegedeon.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women Podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.